Two people, same job, same pressure, same impossible deadlines. One of them falls apart. Anxiety, insomnia, depression. The stress consumes everything. The other one struggles, but recovers. Feels the pressure, but doesn't break. Gets knocked down, and comes back. For decades, science assumed this difference was psychological. Mindset, attitude, willpower. They were wrong. Two studies published in 2024, one in Physiological Reviews, one in Neuron, have now identified the biological mechanisms that determine why some brains recover from stress and others don't. And what they found changes everything about how we understand resilience. By the end of this video, you will understand the three biological systems that separate resilient brains from vulnerable ones, what your hippocampus, prefrontal cortex, and reward system are actually doing under stress, and why resilience is not a personality trait. It is a neurobiological state. Before we go further, because this is Curious and Verified, here are the sources. The first is a comprehensive review titled Neurobiology and Systems Biology of Stress Resilience, published in Physiological Reviews in March 2024, by researchers from the Leibniz Institute for Resilience Research in Germany and the Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai in New York. The second is titled Neurobiological Basis of Stress Resilience, published in Neuron in May 2024, also from the Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai. Both links are in the description. Now, let's get into it. First, what does resilience actually mean biologically? The 2024 Physiological Reviews paper defines it precisely. Stress resilience is the phenomenon that some people maintain their mental health despite exposure to adversity, or show only temporary impairments followed by quick recovery. The key word is temporary. Resilience does not mean stress doesn't affect you. It means your brain recovers from the effect. And the paper makes something else clear immediately. Resilience is not the default state. It requires active biological processes to maintain it. Your brain is not passively resilient. It is actively working to stay that way. The first biological system the research identifies is the hippocampus. We have covered the hippocampus in this series before. It is critical for memory formation and one of the regions most sensitive to cortisol. The 2024 Physiological Reviews paper found that hippocampal function is one of the strongest biological predictors of resilience. Specifically, neuroplasticity in the hippocampus. Neuroplasticity is the brain's ability to form new connections, generate new neurons, and reorganize its structure in response to experience. In resilient individuals, the hippocampus maintains a higher capacity for neuroplasticity under stress. In vulnerable individuals, chronic stress suppresses this capacity, leading to the hippocampal volume reductions we discussed in episode 1 of this series. The difference is not in whether stress affects the hippocampus. It is in how quickly and completely it recovers. The second system is the prefrontal cortex. Again, familiar territory. The prefrontal cortex regulates emotional responses, suppresses the amygdala's threat signals, and allows deliberate, considered decision-making. Under stress, this region becomes less effective in everyone. But the paper found a critical difference in resilient individuals. Their prefrontal cortex maintains stronger functional connectivity to the emotional regulation circuits, even under sustained stress. It keeps communicating. It keeps regulating. In vulnerable individuals, that connectivity weakens more severely and recovers more slowly. The result is what many people experience as being flooded by stress, the inability to think clearly, the feeling that emotion overwhelms rational thought, the sense that you have lost control of your own responses. In resilient brains, the prefrontal cortex holds the line longer. The third system is the one most people would not expect. The reward system. The mesolimbic dopamine pathway, the circuit responsible for motivation, pleasure, and the anticipation of positive outcomes. The Neuron paper from Mount Sinai found that stress resilience is actively supported by the reward system's ability to maintain function under adversity. In resilient individuals, dopamine signaling in this pathway remains relatively stable even under chronic stress. Motivation persists. The ability to anticipate positive outcomes survives. The sense that effort leads to reward is maintained. In vulnerable individuals, Chronic stress blunts this system. Motivation drops. Pleasure decreases. The future begins to feel pointless. This is the neurobiological substrate of what clinically presents as the anhedonia, the loss of pleasure, that characterizes depression. And the paper argues that supporting this reward system may be one of the most important targets for building biological resilience. Here is where the research becomes genuinely surprising. The Physiological Reviews paper found that resilience is not determined by genetics alone. It is also shaped by 4 biological factors that are modifiable. The first is neuroplasticity, which we have covered, the ability of the brain to adapt and reorganize. The second is immunoregulation. The paper found that resilient individuals show more effective regulation of inflammatory responses to stress. They mount an immune response, but they also resolve it more efficiently. Chronic low-grade inflammation, which we covered in episode 2, is less persistent in resilient brains. The third is gut microbiome composition. The paper cites growing evidence that the specific composition of gut bacteria influences resilience to stress, connecting directly to what we covered in episode 5. The fourth is the integrity of 2 barriers, the gut barrier and the blood-brain barrier. When these barriers are compromised by chronic stress, inflammatory molecules enter the brain more easily. In resilient individuals, these barriers maintain their integrity better. Now, a critical eye. The Physiological Reviews paper is explicit about the limitations of this field. Much of the biological resilience research has been conducted in animal models, primarily rodents. Translating findings from mice to humans is not straightforward. The brain circuits involved are similar, but human resilience involves cognitive, social, and cultural dimensions that animal models cannot capture. The paper notes that biological resilience research has lagged behind psychological and social resilience research. Many of the human studies are correlational, identifying associations between biological markers and resilience without establishing causation. And critically, resilience is not a fixed state. A person can be highly resilient at one point in their life and significantly less resilient at another, depending on cumulative stress load, sleep, social support, and other factors the research is still mapping. The paper is careful to frame this as a developing field, promising, consistent in its direction, but not yet complete. Let's bring this back to where we started. 2 people. Same stress, different outcomes. The research says the difference is not fundamentally about strength of character or quality of mindset. It is about the biological state of 3 systems, the hippocampus, the prefrontal cortex, and the reward pathway, and 4 modifiable factors, neuroplasticity, immunoregulation, gut microbiome, and barrier integrity. Resilience is not something you either have or you don't. It is a dynamic biological state that the brain actively maintains, or fails to maintain, based on factors that science is now beginning to identify and potentially to target. The question worth sitting with is this: if resilience is a biological state rather than a character trait, what does that say about how we talk about people who struggle to recover from stress? And what would it mean to build resilience from the biology up? Leave your thoughts in the comments. Both studies are linked in the description, peer-reviewed and free to read. As always on this channel, the source comes first. Subscribe if you want more, and we will see you in the next one.